Hi, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com here with my weekly series talking about modern fatherhood. And I'm excited to have kind of a different point of view on partnership and parenting with our guest today, Zach Watson. Nice to meet you, Zach.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I appreciate it.
I was really interested in your profile because this certainly is the topic we're going to talk about is really comes up a lot right now, and it's really about partnerships and I guess partnerships in general, but also when you're in a relationship, especially when you have a child involved, how much mental load the usually the woman takes on, and sometimes, or for perhaps for millennia, has complained about bitterly to her girlfriends, but has never really been able to totally communicate that to her male partner. Is that a
Mhm.
fair assessment of where we are?
Yeah, I'll be a little braggadocious for a hot minute. Is back in November 2023, I saw that Kristen Bell left a comment on one of my videos, which my head kind of exploded from that. And I realized that she was following me. And so I sent her a DM to do a collaboration. I figured I'd shoot my shot. And I said, hey, if you've noticed in any of my skits, I'm a pretty terrible actor. I'd love to have a professional help me out. And she said, Zach, I've been trying to explain this to with my girlfriends, with my husband for the last 10 years. And like it's making more sense in some of the ways that you're speaking about it.
Hmm.
So I mean, I'm absolutely not the first person to talk about mental load. I think I've gotten really loud and consistently loud about it. But a lot of what I learned was from a lot of women. The first book being Fair Play. I've read a handful of things in the past couple of years to much better understand it. But coming at it from a men's perspective, I think I'm able to hopefully hit a chord that I think
Yeah, so let's
falls for
talk
men.
about what that mental load is, because I think all the focus has really been on are men picking up all half of the household chores. If you've got a child in the house, or even if you just have a shared apartment, there's stuff that has to be done: the
Mhm.
laundry, washing the kitchen, doing the bathroom, doing the vacuuming. It's just it's endless. And women for you know long time have said that men don't, they leave their socks on the floor, and they leave the dishes in the sink, and they just expect their wife slash their new mom to
Yep.
come up and clean everything up. So that's one part of it, is the stuff that's obvious in the household. The dishwasher is full, why didn't you empty it out? But the
Right.
other is the mental load. And so explain a little bit what the mental load is.
Yeah. So the biggest umbrella term that I often use is invisible labor. So
Hmm.
I think when we think of chores, we're thinking about very physical in nature things.
That
When
you
it
could
comes,
quantify, like you could
yeah,
divide them all up, right? If you
yeah. So the way that I typically break down invisible labor is into three main categories. So the first one is domestic labor. So that let's take the shoes by the door. So
I got
physically
those.
taking your shoes off at the door, putting them by the door, and I don't know, maybe arranging them slightly neatly. I would call it domestic labor. That's a physical thing. You can see it on a camera. The mental load associated with that might be um, knowing that your toddler is probably going to trip over them if they're not in the appropriate place. Knowing that if there's typically some wetness on the bottom of them and it's a wood floor, that we need to have either we need to replace that and put tiles in, or we need to have a little catcher for the water that seeps in there. And or the thinking around, okay, how is that going to change the value of this house? And or is it going to get gross? Is the wood going to start rotting at some point? Um, so it's invisible because I think the closest we can come to having mental load caught on camera usually is sort of like a blank stare into the abyss. Or for me, I know it looks like me patting my pockets. Phone keys, wallet. Do I have everything I need? Is what mental load looks like for me often. Um, so there's those are the first two, and then the third one is emotional labor. Similarly, it's invisible, but I think the emotional labor aspect around the shoes might be, I would say, if I think oftentimes, right? I think a lot of moms care more about the aesthetic of their homes. They're also judged significantly
Yeah.
more by their
Yeah.
family. And so it takes emotional labor thinking about, oh, when my mother-in-law comes in, she's going to be judging everything in my home. So for fork's sake, please put your shoes where they belong so it's not one more thing that I have to do. So the emotional experience of thinking about how she's going to get judged and or thinking about how the presentation is going to look at people coming in. Like when you see shoes everywhere, like it's like, okay, this is being lived in versus if you're a guest and you aren't noticing that the shoes are everywhere because they're neatly put away, that's not what you're thinking about.
Right.
Um, so I would say most chores, I really help people break it down into three categories. When you can see the three categories, when you can describe them, I think a lot more husbands start appreciating the heaviness of what they experience, especially in their careers, but also start much better appreciating why their partners feel so lonely, and like unsupported in a lot of ways.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the problem here stems a lot, like you say, that the women are judged on a lot of things that we don't feel in the same way, and
Mm,
quite often I think that comes off as we're patronizing, we laugh at them, we belittle their concerns, but at the same time, I mean, some of them do. I mean, rationally, they do seem like, why are you so like bent out of shape? Like you've taken
mm,
something like a couple shoes in the hallway, and now we're having a full-on fight and ruining our evening based on this one thing. And I guess that's my curiosity is how does a guy know how far to take this? I mean, because women will like they'll have the if my kid needs a like a doctor's appointment, that'll be on my
mhm,
to-do list, right? For a
mhm.
mom, it's a mental load thing where she's thinking like that's like in the back of her mind, it's weighing on her. Whereas
Yeah.
for a lot of men, we don't let it weigh on us in that same way.
Well, I would say that when we think about like the difference between it weighing on somebody versus it just kind of existing on a to-do list and it'll
Hmm.
get done when it gets done, I would argue that a lot of us in our careers, we have a fair amount of mental load. So I think a lot of the way that women get judged, and a lot of the ways that men get judged, those are the things that weigh more heavily on us. So I don't know if you've ever seen these kind of joke videos of um, there'll be an announcement, hey, company's coming over in 30 minutes. Let's get the house ready. And, she's typically inside cleaning things. And then all of a sudden the video cuts away to the husband blowing leaves off the roof or something. Like, what are you doing? The company's coming over. I think that we typically put energy into things that we are expecting to be judged for.
That is very
So
true. Yeah.
as seemingly stupid as that might feel for a lot of people is like, why is he getting leaves off the roof? That might be what he feels like he's going to be judged for, is the exterior appearance of a home. Similarly, I think a lot of men are judged on how much money they bring in, how well they're, quote, providing. And so we take our careers probably more seriously than we ought to, because that's how we see that we're going to be judged
Hmm.
from a societal standpoint. So I would argue that when you're looking at like, okay, why is it that the doctor's appointment for the kid is going to weigh on her more than it weighs for him? Is also, I think for some dads that take their role very seriously, um, knowing whether their kid's going to get to their appointment on the appropriate, every 6 months or every 12 months or whatever, um, the ones that weighs for, the ones that like they'll feel judged or they'll feel like an inadequate father for not having managed that. That is probably a correlation with how much it's going to weigh for them when it's on their task list.
Mhm. So why do we look at this then so much more from the female perspective? Or maybe that's not your point, but if the guy is very focused on these other external factors that he might feel more sensitive to, and she's got her list, are we trying to get everybody more focused on her list, or are we trying to get a deeper understanding that both parts of a equally, let's say, an equally working relationship
Yeah.
have different trigger points.
I would argue that it's not his list or hers list. It's not either of their lists. It's the list that exists for the home. And a lot of times the management of that list tends to fall on moms. And why are we focusing on this? Well, I think we hear a lot in the news today about male loneliness epidemic. We also hear a lot about how there's an issue with there not enough babies being born apparently. And why is that? Because women are saying like, hell no, I don't want to have a child because the mental load's already on me. Why I don't want
Yeah,
more.
I already have one
Um,
fully
and
grown
when
child.
when we look at the divorce rate, right, women are initiating more of those divorces because they're fed up with that. And there's also stats that show that marriage benefits married men significantly more than it benefits married women. It's like married men live longer, and similarly, single women live longer than married women. So I think that the reason that our attention is on this is because we're seeing a couple other symptoms that people are not liking and or they're not understanding and they're trying to get to the bottom of. And I think the mental load is a huge part of that. Because that's a huge source of loneliness for, I have a 91% women audience, and over the past couple of years as I've built about a little over 1 million followers over across 4 platforms, um, I've really gotten to know kind of where their pain points are.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because it's similar for my website, GreatDad.com, which we started almost 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Since the beginning, the majority of the viewers have been women. I think 70
Really?
75%. Like guys just aren't as they don't keep on coming back. They're not as involved in the message. So I think the challenge is what should motivate men to at least have an idea of these concepts because I mean maybe first it's fear. I mean fear that you're going to lose your relationship over time,
Yeah.
but it's also how do you deepen your connection with your partner and have a stronger relationship, be a stronger mom and dad team together. This is one key element
Yeah.
what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
And maybe we don't think about. We think about
I
other
think
things.
a totally fair place to start is fear. I think, looking at relationships, Alyssa and I were separated back in 2018. We didn't have the words for it then, but we had just bought a new house. It was a three-family, and we wanted to renovate on it. And I was not putting in nearly enough mental labor into the home. I thought if I showed up and, was doing a bunch of the carpentry work that I knew how to do at the time, which wasn't much. And I was doing the physical heavy lifting and doing the gross, like, horsehair plaster, and I was getting that stuff out and dealing with like doing all the physical stuff. Meanwhile, she was being a project manager behind the scenes of like getting the electrician to come in, getting the plumber to come in, getting the general contractor. Like, there's a reason that that the director gets paid more than the person that shows up hourly and gets dirty, because they're doing the harder work, in my opinion. And I think that's where I think when we can start seeing how our partners are being project managers, meanwhile we're being a bit more of like employee hourly type wage
Mm,
workers in our own home. um, it makes a little bit more sense why so many women are either opting out of marriage, opting out of having more kids, or opting out of relationships and marriage in general, or the current marriages that they have. So I think for guys to start, yeah, I think there's a healthy amount of fear in there. I think that's for sure where I started and where I wanted to get my marriage back. Um, but I think also being able to have a significantly better understanding of where invisible labor lies, it also helps you appreciate why things don't work around you. So, for example, I talk with three of my guy friends. Every week we send each other like a voice note of like how things have been going that past week. A mixture of accountability and friendship because we don't live in college. We don't see each other every day. So that's how we stay in touch. And every 60 to 90 days, we aim to meet up for like a reset of our goals. And last meet, one of the guys had to bail last minute. We set a next date, and then realized that the other guy that wasn't there wasn't able to make that next date. So there was a handful of messages sent like, "Hey, can you guys do this weekend?" No, I can't do that. Can you do this weekend? And so it's just a back and forth and sideways between four different guys. And at some point, I paused and I said, "Hold on, just stop this conversation." I went over to the doodle poll and I set up I think that's what it's called. I set up my preferences. I said, just answer the
Right.
survey and it'll give us results on
Right.
what weekends work. And there was a moment of appreciation, especially because these guys, hear about what I talk about all the time. And they said, Zach, thanks for handling the mental load. That was super useful. And similarly, like that moment when you're hanging out with your friends that maybe you haven't seen in a while, like, yeah, we should do this together again. It takes emotional labor. It takes mental load to break out your phone and say, okay, let's do this. We're scheduling right now. Pull your phones out. It's like a mildly uncomfortable conversation for some people to pull their phones out and do that. Um, but when you appreciate invisible labor, when you appreciate, oh, this is emotional labor that I'm doing, oh, this is cognitive labor that I'm doing right here, like it feels a little bit less awkward because you're appreciating the effort that's required to have enjoyable things happen in your life, like hanging out with your friends, especially when we're adults, when having friendships takes significantly more effort.
Yeah.
So I think besides fear, I think when we can appreciate how much goes into the experience that we have a lot more empathy for the people around us. And I think we have a lot more both appreciation for the work that we do and other people do around us.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter told me a funny story the other day about how she has a friend of hers who owes her $16 from a dinner they went out on. And
Mhm.
she had to remind her again. And the friend said, "Oh, wow, I'm really sorry. I've got to put that in my calendar so I remind myself to Venmo you the $16." And my daughter's thinking like, you need to put that in you're texting me right now. I mean, you open up the damn Venmo and just send it to
Yeah.
me. But that's the kind of mental load thing where that person is making it a project, and my daughter's got to carry the mental load of
Yeah.
she still owes me $16. Do I let it go? Do I keep on nagging her about it?
Yeah, and then there's the emotional labor.
The
It's
emotional part of it,
uncomfortable to ask somebody to
right? Over and
send you
over again.
money. I think, yeah, and especially like at some point, like the question of do I give up because it's uncomfortable. This is putting a strain in between me and my friend, and I would rather just say, you know what, it's just a gift. It's fine. Um,
But yeah.
and there were moments so like we had a small loan from my parents, about $1,000, and it was taking us a little bit of time to pay it back. And like every time my dad would talk with me, he would end up bringing up money. I was like, this is not worth my relationship with you. Like I would rather be able to chat about being a dad and like our work and like family. I don't want to have to talk about money every time that I'm on the phone with you. So when we pay off this loan, like we're not we don't
But
want to take a loan out ever again.
so let's talk about that as a mental load thing where a partner isn't involved. What would be the appropriate appreciation of that mental load that would fit into what we're talking about?
I mean, I think it's a little bit easier for me because I talk about it on the internet at nauseum. But I think simple things saying like, "Hey, I appreciate you, handling the mental load of reminding me here," because one, it shows the other person
Oh, rather
that
than don't nag me, you're yelling at me again about this thing.
yeah,
Even better would be to say, I realize that I appreciate you reminding me
yeah,
because I've forgotten about it. I had a lot going on, and
yeah,
I
and
mean, even that, even if you then put it off 20 more times, at least the person understands that you realize that they aren't being
yeah, and Laura Danger
bitchy or
is a
naggy.
she's a content creator that I learned a lot from, and she calls it the nag paradox, where it's like stop reminding me. Okay, well, are you gonna do it? Like, I'll get to it when I get to it. And so, like, when you when you start saying someone's nagging you, you're actually putting them in a paradoxical situation where they don't get their need met, and they're also not allowed to remind you, or else they're being a nag. So it creates this like an infinity loop where they don't get their needs met, and you don't, and then you can't be held accountable for it.
Right. Yeah. They're putting they're just labeled now, and you get off scot-free because
Yeah.
they're
And the
they're the
the
nag.
person in the paradox loop, right? They're also handling the mental and emotional labor, and the person that's saying that they're nagging them, they're avoiding both of those things.
Yeah. I've got a project on my desk that's exactly fits in exactly that paradigm. Uh, so what talk about a little bit about the fair play method as a way to address this.
Yeah. So the Fair Play book, written by Eve Rodsky, 2019, the general idea of the Fair Play method is rather than having responsibilities in the home be things that can all be kind of delegated, the goal is instead to silo together conception, planning, and execution. So, for example, let's take a school project. Uh, so our 4-year-old, or almost 4-year-old, she's going to be putting together a cardboard vehicle next week. We're actually breaking the fair play principle here, but knowing that we are breaking it helps us be empowered around it. So, ideally, what keeping conception, planning, execution together would be is whichever parent decides to take it on owns all of it. There's no delegation of it.
Mm.
And so, the value in that is that all of the mental load ends up also being on the person that's executing. And I think a lot of times we see a lot of the imbalance, because I think a lot of guys tend to do a lot of the execution. A lot of moms tend to do a lot more of the emotional and the mental load of it, but maybe not the physical execution of it. And what that turns into is, I've been managing the trash bins for the past couple of years. And at some point, we got into this habit of she would say, "Hey, it's Monday. Have you put the trash out again?" And so that's her owning the mental load, her having the emotional labor of thinking about how it's going to look, or if we're going to have a bunch of extra stuff in and around our trash area. And that would be similarly breaking fair play method, because if I'm executing, I should
Yeah, right,
also be
right.
doing
You
the
owned it.
the
Yeah.
mental preparation for it. So the fair play method, the general idea is to really cut back on delegation. She calls them rats, randomly assigned tasks, because also
Honey-do list.
yeah, when you are keeping those things in the same silo, there's there's way less excuses, but there's also less like contextual misses. So I could imagine, let's say it's next Wednesday, it's the day before we got to bring in our project into school. And let's say I'm out on an errand and Alyssa says, "Hey, can you remember to grab glue?" And I forget the glue. I get home and she's like, "I can't believe I asked for one thing, glue. How could you forget?" I'm missing the context of why glue is important, because let's say that was her
Yep.
task. So, I think that it can work to break those apart when you're aware of all of the invisible labor around it. I think the fair play method helps people really build awareness around the invisible labor that exists with every single responsibility in the home.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys would be like, "Wow, you're just making this so complicated." I mean, I like just the stuff. A lot of stuff in our house just gets done organically, and not tons of it becomes, conflictual. But that's what we're trying to avoid. I
Mm,
mean, wrapped up in all this is all the baggage of emasculation and having to
mm,
do things you don't want to do, and uh because for a lot of guys, even doing 50% of the chores is, that's already a stretch. Now you add on, now I've got to worry about her mental load too. Come on. I mean,
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, and like even think about today. So my toddler she's at school. My wife is in the city. She maybe once a month, once every other month, she goes into the city. So one thing that I would say Alyssa typically does pick up, and in pickup, she's often looking to see, has our 3.5-year-old had a nap? If she's had a nap, that changes the urgency that we're getting her home and or making sure she's fed by 5 o'clock versus 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so there were a handful of times where I was saying, "Oh, do you know she napped today?" And she's like, "Check the fucking app." So there were there's moments when we can appreciate, oh, she's holding the mental load of whether a nap has happened, and that has, you know, I don't want a 3.5-year-old meltdown at 8 o'clock because I wasn't aware of nap time and she's overtired, and now it's going to be a terrible put down process. So like I need to be a little bit more on point today because I'm running solo probably till 7 or 8 o'clock. I need to be aware of if she had nap today. I need to check the app and see
There's
and
an
pay
app for
attention.
that. There's an app for whether they had a nap.
Yeah,
Nap
we
app.
have an app that it connects with our daycare.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, and like also normally she checks the notifications for our daycare. So if she was feeling sick and last minute she needed to go home, like I need to be paying attention to those notifications because typically Alyssa's the default. And or we've agreed that we try to stay away from defaults and have more assignments. So we agreed that she would own these things. And so on a day where she's away, like that needs to be a little bit more intentionally moved over so that the ball's not getting dropped.
Hmm. Well, it is kind of does feel a little bit like more like a, chore list, like you'd give a kid. Because I'm just thinking, like I usually end up being the one who takes the garbage bins out because I'm the one who
Mhm.
it's my mental load. I mean, I obsess about it all Wednesday because I know they have to be out by Wednesday or Thursday. I'll be woken up by the garbage truck with that realization that, oh damn, they didn't go out. But there was never a specific delegation that didn't not on my chore list. It didn't end up on some big scoreboard of I've done, my half of the things.
Mhm.
But that too, if you don't realize that those are your responsibilities, that can build in resentment, like because it's
Mhm.
unspoken over time. You're just like, why is it always my job to take out the bins? Just because I'm the guy, I have to do
Yeah.
guy things. Maybe I don't want to do the guy things.
Yeah. It's not necessarily, it doesn't need to be gendered. I think we just tend to
Right.
do that for sure. One of the things that a lot of the guys that I'm coaching, I really encourage them to take a macro look at their whole family. So, look at all the responsibilities that exist in your home. That's part of the Fair Play method is she has a card deck. If anyone's watching the video, it's over my shoulder here. So there's 100 cards, that are typical responsibilities that exist in the home. And step one, get rid of all the cards that are not relevant to you. Step two, identify where they kind of currently lay, like who owns, I say 51% of the cards. Once you see who owns 51% of the cards and include your jobs, this is where I think the Fair Play cards stop. And I like the Persist app because it gives you a little bit more um, graphical data on it. But then looking at, okay, how many hours per week are being spent on the different things in our home? And like, are both partners justified in where they are at? Like, is she overloaded or is it not as bad as we think? And I think a lot of times guys will put all the data into the Persist app. They'll look at all the hours spent on things. They're like, holy crap, like she does spend a crazy amount of time. Like she has all the mental load on things. One guy, I think they had 66 cards. He couldn't claim more than 51% ownership for a single card.
But I'm sure there are guys out there like, yeah, but she invents half of the stuff like my wife, uh, I can't fold the towels because she has a specific way of folding the towels, or somebody's obsession about dusting every day or something is so above what a guy would consider normal. And sometimes it's
Mm,
just that it's not even maybe it's dusting every week is more than a guy would think is normal. But the guy's like looks at that list and says, yeah, she's doing 75%, but I'd cut out half these activities. I wouldn't even do these activities. So how do you convince guys to like understand that that's part of the give and take is like respecting your wife and doing maybe going beyond what your level of 100% is part of maintaining that relationship
yeah.
versus but then also knowing what do you do when you are married to a somebody who's an obsessive compulsive and has
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah, there's two main places I would go with that, especially if I was on a call with one of the couples I work with, is I would first look at like what are the values that both of you share and or where do you differ on them. So
Mhm.
let's say it's clearing like dusting surfaces on a daily basis. Yep, that definitely feels a bit excessive for me. I think for Alyssa, that would be not quite excessive, but
She wouldn't mind it.
might she might it might not be worth the labor for her. I know we
Yeah.
don't currently do that.
Yeah.
Um, So we'd start with like, why is this important to us? And from there, I might also a lot of what I end up teaching a lot of the guys is emotional literacy and fluency. So we go through sort of an emotional wheel. We talk about joy, anger, shame, guilt, fear, loneliness, sadness, and hurt. And so from there, I would encourage them to say, all right, when you think about being asked to dust surfaces every day, what are the like name the emotions that pop up for you as you're thinking about that. And so as we're able to talk about those things, oftentimes one emotion kind of pops up that none of us were expecting. Like like there's shame that shows up for me around this thing. Like, wow, that was we're feeling like this is out of left field. And so I think a lot of times it's we have unregulated emotions about things that stop us from having really good conversations about logistics. Um, a lot of it's all emotional underneath. And so I think we get stuck on logistics a lot. So when we can get to the emotional undergrowth of it, I think we're able to have significantly more constructive conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So, what do why do people usually come to you? I mean, is it usually before problem? I can imagine it isn't never. It's never before problems start. It's always when there are intractable fights and there's like this ongoing theme of like he doesn't appreciate all the stuff I do and he's never there or he never shows up or all that
Uh,
type of stuff. And
I would say 99% of the guys that I work with, their wives found me first and said, please listen to this man. And I would say probably 50 plus percent, I would say 85 plus percent are married. 50% have had a singular or more conversation around separation, divorce. Like
wow,
think
wow,
things are not in a great spot. Like we're struggling here.
wow.
So
And
sadly,
just
they don't.
around this issue, it's not about some other values orientation or
I think that this
likes
is
to travel. I
this is
don't.
like the bleeding wound.
Yeah.
That's like
The everyday. Yeah.
it's like
And like you
the
say, it's so tied to loneliness in a marriage if you feel like the
yeah
person isn't doing it, but it's also the respect or the empathy with the emotions that she's feeling.
yeah.
How do you create an analog for men to understand that from the other side? Like how would you feel if you felt your wife wasn't living up to X in your relationship? Is there a way to get guys to understand, not only just for the fear of losing their marriage, but like,
Yeah.
like you say, it's fair play. It's not,
What I really aim for, which seems to be one of the easiest ways to resonate with a lot of guys, is looking at their careers. So, if you're the only one taking notes on this meeting and you have to remind every single one of your teammates like what their to-do items are, and you have to
right.
follow up with them to make sure that they do them, or else they're going to say, "Hey, you didn't remind me."
You'd fire them.
Usually, I'm able to help, yeah, create a little bit of a scenario of like where them holding the mental load and emotional labor might show up within their careers, especially if, they're a little bit further into their careers.
Mhm.
I'm usually able to find a lot of parallels that exist, especially if they're, you know, getting paid pretty well and they have to do a lot more. I think the more you get paid, the more cognitive and or emotional labor that you probably have to do for your job,
Yeah.
versus like the lower level paid jobs are typically much more physical.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that a lot of the people that I see, they're able to connect that with things in their work and hit a little bit more of a turning point and be like, yeah, that is frustrating as hell. Like, I don't like reminding, like, what's the point of having an assistant if I have to remind them things? Um, so that's usually where I aim for with a lot of guys is talking about the invisible labor that exists in their jobs and in their careers, in their workplace. It's pretty rare I'm not able to help them connect the dots there.
Do you see any situations where it's the other way around? It's the wife who is less who needs to be nagged and needs to be reminded, or I would expect there are plenty of professional women who are really into their careers who when they get home
Yeah.
that they're not taking on the mental load at home because they got the mental load at work.
Um, I don't have any clients that are in that position.
Uh-huh.
Um, I would say that I've gotten a handful of direct messages on like Instagram saying like, "Hey, I'm a woman and I've been really appreciating your content too." So I would say a lot of the free content that I put out there is mappable onto all relationships. I really try to use the word partner rather than husband wife.
Yeah.
But I would say when it comes to like clients, it's much more cis hetero normative.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because like I said, I just get more women are endorse the idea of involved parenting, involved fatherhood. They want to see their partners. Sometimes they want to see their partners step up. Sometimes they just want to appreciate their partner for being a really good and present dad. But
Yeah.
you can tell that it's a really important value to them, that it's not just a marriage, but it is a partnership. And that, I guess, that word, it has the politically correct value, but it kind of changes the way that you define the marriage and this partnership that for a long time was really, really one-sided. And we have to realize we live in a different time. And I think that's hopefully the trend we're on, is that more men are not seeing this as emasculating as much as they are seeing it as I don't know, maybe it's helping everybody, become more fulfilled and have equal stakes in these relationships.
Yeah.
Especially since women are more and more they're the decision makers on whether we're out the door or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason that we see so much more of that today than we did years ago is because they're financially able to. I think it was like the 70s as women couldn't even pull out a credit card without their husband's permission. And or marital, sexual assault. I don't know if marital rape wasn't even illegal till the 90s.
Yeah.
So
So,
they're much more empowered because times are changing.
yeah. Yeah. Well, Zach, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this. Really, it's fascinating to me, just having watched this over, a bunch of generations, how this has changed. And I think that the starting point of just like pick up your damn socks is such just a baby step to
Mhm.
what we're talking about all the way through 50-50 division of labor, but then also appreciation for the whole management part of this equation, which obviously I think most people who are listening to this are probably already a little bit thinking that way. They understand what women are going through today, and hopefully that
Yeah.
this has been helpful, especially since you have some real concrete things to not only that you've said, but also some tools. So people can find you. I think we'll put in the show notes the exact link. But I guess if you search mental load basics, both on
Yep.
YouTube, you've got an Instagram channel.
Yeah, I would
Of
say
course.
YouTube's probably if you're looking for, if you're not looking to just zone out, I'm sure you can find me on Instagram, but YouTube, I have a fair amount of like training slash like educational videos to help people that really want to learn. And if people are looking for more than a comment section for people to talk with, and I know the comment section's not the kindest place for the men out there for me.
Oh yeah.
So I aim for that free community is really built for men to be able to ask those what may be considered dumb questions, and I will answer with humility.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, because I think a lot of guys do go into those situations, go into those kind of forums, and end up
Yeah.
getting just abused versus just appreciation for the fact that they want to listen, they want to learn, just to start with.
Yeah. I, I don't mean to sound egotistical, but I have a few too many comments right now in my general comment section to manage and police those things. But I know that my comment section is not necessarily a kind place for a lot of guys that want to ask honest questions. That's why I made the free community.
Yeah, especially, I mean, it's sad, like in all kinds of domains. A naive question sometimes comes off as
Yeah.
insensitive, but sometimes it's not. It's the self-acclaimed ignorance and the willingness to learn, which should be celebrated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Paul, thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, great. Paul Banis with GreatDad.com. Thanks a lot for listening. We'll be back next week. You can check out my coaching offerings as well as a new newsletter at GreatDad.com/go. Until next time, stay strong.